Good morning, everyone. It is definitely an honor and privilege to be here. I'd like to give this presentation to our Blessed Mother and ask for help together with a Hail Mary in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So, does anybody remember Earl Weaver? He was the manager for the Baltimore Orioles. He had a fire hydrant personality, this guy. It was intense. And his reputation preceded him. So this one time, one of his players was called out at home plate, and he didn't like the call. So he gets up there, and he's in the face of the umpire. And the umpire just looks at him, and he says, "Earl, the whole ballpark knows you're wrong. Go sit down." How do you think that went over for a guy like Earl Weaver? It didn't. So he is in his face. I mean, he's right in his grill, and he looks at the umpire and he says, "Listen, if I called you," and I got to clean it up a little bit, "if I called you a horse's tail, would you throw me out of this game?" And he said, "In a New York minute, man, you'd be gone." And he goes, "Well, what if I just thought it? What if I just thought you were a horse's tail? Would you throw me out then?" He goes, "You can think what you want." He goes, "Good, because I think you're a horse's tail." And he got thrown out. Why is that a good story for this? It's a good story because our personalities don't change when we lead. We have natural temperaments that were given to us, and those natural temperaments have natural virtue and natural vice. Our whole mission is to fight against the vice and to exaggerate and amplify, to inspire the virtue in our lives, right? To fortify that. What also happens is there's a self-deceit and there's a trickery. We start to think that we can get smarter than the circumstance and still have our cake and eat it too. Say what we want, but stay in the game. We have to be savvy. We have to be smart. We have to do things the right way as leaders. Now, this topic is about influence. I will tell you that I do have quite a bit of experience working with and in parishes. I mostly build secular companies, but I was one of the founders of an organization some of you may have heard of called Lighthouse Catholic Media. And so we worked with as many, I think, by the time I left the organization, 6,000 parishes. So we heard the plight of what parish priests are going through a lot. My oldest son, is in the seminary. He's going to be ordained a deacon in about a month and a half, and then a priest in a little while after that. As you all know who have become priests, you know that I really can't take any credit for it at all. I just got out of the way of the Holy Spirit. That is it. And actually mostly got in the way, but somehow it happened anyway. But the fact is that in this, I am humbled by the leadership challenges that you face as priests, and I speak in the full context of that. But one of the things that I also know is that leadership is leadership. It really is. I mean, it truly actually is. If we are good stewards of the gifts that we had in order to lead, all good leaders will lead people to heaven. Now, some of them might do it through the accounting department, okay? Others here and there, but we all work together on this particular mission and goal. So you really can't separate the idea of leadership and influence. They're really very much the same thing. Let me ask you this question, and by the way, this is interactive. If this is going to work well, you're going to have to interrupt me a lot. We have 3 hours together, and this is your presentation, not mine. So we want to stop and say, here's something that I'm dealing with. How do I handle that? Or here are my thoughts on it. And as much of that as we possibly can, great. I'm going to come down there and do more walking around than I do standing up here. But I want to ask you a question. When you think of the number one greatest trait of a leader, okay, what is it? When a leader is a great leader, what is it that they exhibit? Or better yet, what is it that they accomplish? What is that? Now, if I said to somebody, tell me, what is it that made the greatest leader in your life, the greatest leader in your life, what is that thing? Throw out some things. There are many very good answers, by the way. So you're not going to say anything that's like, oh, how'd you come up with that? But yes. Inspire confidence, a huge one. Very important. By the way, this is going to be not a trick question, but I don't think you're going to get this because nobody ever does. So just, yes. Courage. Great one, huge. An all-consuming vision, awesome. Listens, what's that? I'm kidding. Listen, I bet, yeah. I shouldn't tell you this because you're going to just automatically, I'm destroyed my credibility and you'll see my weaknesses. But a good friend of mine, a priest, was in the confessional, and he didn't know that it was me that went in because it's, and I go in, and I said something about I should have listened to, or I had a communication thing. He goes, well, you just need to listen better, and I just couldn't resist. And I said, what's that, Father? And he goes, yeah, enough. You need to listen better. I was like, that's not happening in here. Okay, so listen better. Yeah. Charity, great. Risk-taking? Great people around them? Now we're going to stop on this one here. All of those were tremendous, but I will tell you the number one thing. A great leader takes people where they need and want to go. At the end of the day, that's what it is. See, we take a lot of pot shots at leaders. So one of the greatest American pastimes is to call it hypocrisy. Oh, that person's a hypocrite, or they this, or they that. And people spend all sorts of time on the individual human leading their character traits, the things they like or they don't like, and they don't stop to say, are they taking people where they need and want to go? That's the most important thing. If you had a really cool pilot who was awesome and totally fun and everybody loved, but you got on the airplane and you were supposed to go to Dallas and they were going to take you to San Francisco, would they be a great pilot? No. What if the pilot was kind of a jerk, but you needed to get to Dallas? Wouldn't you rather be on that? Safe, but kind of a jerk. I'd rather be on that plane. Now, wouldn't it be great to have a really safe, awesome, cool pilot that takes you to the right place? Yeah, that would be great. But all you have to do is look at the order of things to say what really matters here is taking them where you need to take them. Now, by the way, it's very difficult to take people to where you need to take them when it comes to leadership and be a jerk. It's very difficult, okay? The pilot example works well there because I can use the analogy and you can see the visual, but in practicality, it's a very difficult thing to do that way. We, by the way, even saw this in, I'm not getting into politics, but this is one of the biggest problems. Oh, this person, I don't like him. So let me ignore where we're going. But this person seems cooler, so let me ignore where that's taking us, right? That is like, it's a problem because you can't lead effectively when that happens and you see the result of that sort of thing. But you still have to pay attention to where things are going. This is the thing that really matters here in all of this. So leadership is about taking people where they want and need to go. Now, it's not just want to go, because some people want to go bad places. It's want and need to go. Sometimes we have to help them understand that want portion isn't quite as effective. So we're going to get into a lot of things here. By the way, every one of those answers is tremendous. They're all great answers. They're all super high level answers. They're all right in their own way. Funny, the other one was more the fullness of the truth. Funny where that saying might come from, right? So it comes out that way. All right, so when we are asking ourselves, am I being effective as a leader? The answer to the question is, I'm taking people where they need to go. And this is where the confusion comes in and influence, and it's all over the place confusion. One of the things that's super important for influencers to do is to stop and always ask the question, why am I doing what I am doing right now? This thing, why am I doing this? Does this connect me to where I need to take people? So I always remind people when I help them build companies, I say, listen, if you want to build a great organization, a big organization that eventually has thousands of people in it, you have to remember that the bigger your organization grows, the greater your responsibility is, but the less your responsibilities are. This is a super important thing. If you call the White House and the president answers the phone, wouldn't you think that's a problem? You go, oh, he's a man of the people. No, he's a fool. I'm not speaking specifically. At any time in history, whatever, okay? Whether the president would know how or not to answer the phone is not the question here. So this is a super important thing here that we realize that sometimes, and I use that example because sometimes people use self-righteous things because of silly sayings that are out there in leadership all the time. Servant leadership is one of the most abused things that people speak about. Yes. It is like, oh, you should be emptying the trash because you're a servant leader. Washing the feet isn't emptying the trash. That's a massively different thing, okay? And frankly speaking, If I went to any of our senior executives and I saw them emptying a trash can in order to look like a person of the people, I would be like, stop. Because you've done two things. One is you've robbed another person who is at that level from a job. Okay, let's hire that person, let them do it, and grow in the organization. You've taken that job from them. And two, you are not doing your own job. So it's super important that we recognize that these things are a part of influence. They matter because when we take our own influence away by doing things that we shouldn't be doing, we can't actually influence. We influence by keeping the place clean, by asking that it is clean, and by putting the right person who opportunity that meets, have them clean it. Okay? That's how you serve. Now, does it mean that if you fell short and it's urgent that you need to clean things up, that you're unwilling to empty the garbage? No, yes, do it then. And that makes sense. So it's not being above it, but it's knowing that if you're doing that, you can't do the other things that are necessary to do. So again, to summarize this, because I think if you can take things in a bit of a soundbite, it works. The bigger you build an organization, the greater your responsibility, the less your responsibilities. Okay? In business, and by the way, I do realize a parish is not a business, but there's a business essence to it. There's a similarity in function. And that's, to ignore that doesn't make sense. I'll tell you, I work in nonprofits a lot, and I built a lot of apostolates. And if you ever want to see my dander go up, it's when I bring somebody on and we want them to work more effectively, okay? And then they say something like, well, I don't need to do that because I'm in this just for Christ. I'm like, you have no idea who you just said that to, but this is how this is going to go. If you're in this for Christ, I expect you to triple the amount of time that you're spending. And you know that pay you complained about? I'll expect you to give it all back to the church. I will expect you to look, I'm looking for a crucifix, like that at the end of your day. But you're not here just for that. You're here for that, but you are also here because you're looking for a job and you're looking for meaning. That's okay, actually. That's a good thing, okay? Because God made us human, and we have these particular needs in that way. But when people use the I'm all in for Christ as a reason to not work hard, there is a vein that comes out in my head. And it's super important for us to recognize that when we hear language that is a self-righteous language that is used to actually as a scapegoat against things, that's very problematic, okay? So these are parts of influence, to recognize certain things, to see things, to be keen on what they are. I mean, ultimately speaking, I see the beauty, I understand, I don't want to sound like I'm ridiculing this sort of thing, but one of the things that happened, and churches did it all the time, is about 30 years ago, it became really popular, it lasted for about 15 years. It was the intensity of mission statements. Everybody needed a mission statement. Okay, this is not quite as popular anymore. And people would invest all sorts of time in the mission statement. The corporate world was hilarious. I'd be going in and out of companies doing a lot of speaking, and I always did something. First of all, what is the purpose of a mission statement? It's to get everybody on the same page and walk in the same direction. Okay, what is our mission? We know what it is. Let's do it. And these mission statements are like 4 pages long. So I used to say this. I'd say, hey, other than the CEO and the president of the company and the person who invited me, you have a mission statement, right? I'd like everybody to stand up together just like the Pledge of Allegiance and repeat the mission statement together. No one could do it. No one had any idea what the mission was. Okay? What is the mission of the church? Yeah, so we get to heaven. Get people to heaven, get to heaven. It's not all this fancy long wording. Get people to heaven. There's also really funny things. Oh, we worked really, really hard. What do you think of a company who does? We work as hard as we possibly can on the marketing campaign to develop the greatest products. They're absolutely amazing. Okay? We've built it so that we have the capacity for thousands of people, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. In order to serve our people, it takes about 3 minutes, maybe 8 minutes per serving that we have when people come by. And the whole goal is that we're supposed to serve the whole world. So we're going to be open once a week for 15 minutes. Does anybody know what that analogy is? Confession. Oh, let's see. There's 2,000 families in our parish. So if you do the math on the age, there's about 6,000 people that need to go to confession at least once a year to hit the precepts of the church, which is a D-, by the way. I didn't do the math, but that means there's 100 people that need to go to confession once a week, and it's the same 7 people. You're not supposed to receive the Eucharist if you're not in the state of grace. Nobody's going to confession, but they're all going up to receive the Eucharist, and nobody's becoming a priest and helping out. That sounds like a lot of cholesterol, doesn't it? So, you know what we're going to do to solve that? We're going to have a better parish festival. What? We're going to raise money to replace the bathroom tiles. That's how we're going to fix that. Oh my goodness, really? See, I think as a business guy. So I immediately go in and I go, well, that's not going to work. No matter what, that's not going to work. You can work as hard as you possibly want in every single thing you possibly want to do, but with that one thing there, we can't get there. And you try to influence people to holiness, but then you block, not you, but then they're blocked on the ability to actually be holy, literally. And if a person says, well, no, not really, then that's like seminary 101, right? So this is the type of thing, but that is hard, isn't it? Oh, and by the way, I'm glad I'm not you as a priest. You're way more virtuous than me to be a priest. I'm not kidding when I say that. These young men in the seminary that my son goes to, which is the most successful seminary maybe in the Western world right now. He's in Milwaukee. You may not know this story. He's in Milwaukee. There were, I think, 10 seminarians in there 10 years ago. There are 82 now. They have to build more space to house the seminarians. That is amazing, isn't it? That is amazing. And how did that happen? I will tell you, it was a mix of so many different things, but the role of individual courageous priests playing in it was unbelievably essential. It was unbelievably essential to attract good men, but it was also the encouragement of other men. There's a gentleman who built seminars called Men of Christ seminars. You may have heard of some of this interaction they had. And in Milwaukee, there were no men's conferences at all. For many years, there were some troubling things happening there. When he then came in, he started inviting 1,500, 2,000 people. And they didn't make parish announcements. Nobody would come then. Men ignore that. So he taught people you need to tap people on the shoulder and get them to come. When they say, no, I can't because of golf, you tap them again until it hurts, and then you get them to come. Until there were 4,000 men there, 6,000 guys in small groups, all that kind of stuff. And this is about 17 years ago when this started. And he would stand up on stage after great talks by great men like you, and people were like, wow, I could be like him. That would be great, you know? And then he'd have them come up and say, if you think you may have a calling to the priesthood, not that you're called, but if you may have a calling to the priesthood, walk up on stage and we'll pray for you. And all of a sudden, this years after year after year, there were more men and more men and more men influenced there, let alone the bishop and what he's done and the rector, just fantastic group of people. But I can tell you where that would be blocked. It would be blocked in the parish. But because the parish priests were so strong, like you are, by the way, I know why you're here, because you know most everything that I'm saying. You can grab the microphone and say, shut up. You know what? I'm living this. Let me tell them. I get that. I do get that. I just want you to know when I'm speaking to you, I understand that you understand this intimately. My gift has never really been to tell people what they don't know. It is to put it in terms that make it a little bit more usable. That's really all that it is. I don't believe that I'm going to illuminate anything for you. I think I'm going to clarify things that you've already known in order to take it back and to put it in those bites that allow you to get the traction with it that you've wanted to get if you haven't gotten it, or to help other people to go further than that. Okay, so I want to just break down, what does influence require? It requires a moving of the heart and the mind, motivation and incentive, teams, individuals, and congregations. This is super important. Influence really matters by understanding one particular thing, that there is motive out there for human beings, isn't there? There are three primary motivators. Now, if I'm going to be speaking to a philosopher or a theologian, this conversation is going to be way more articulate and intense than anything I could possibly provide, since I am neither of those. But I am a person who has had to put together incentive plans and watch incentive and motivation on all different levels. I have 6 kids, 5 grandkids now. I remember sitting around the table with my kids several years ago. They're all adults, but when they were younger. And one of them said something, and I said, that's not true. And they go, what do you mean? I said, that's not true. And I said, you don't know this about me, but I'm actually professionally trained for lie detection. And they said, what do you mean? I said, no, I really, and they're like, wow, Dad's CIA or something? I said, I am. I want you to go by, and I want you to tell a story, each one of you, that would be true or false, Okay, and I'll tell you if it's true or false. I was at Katie's yesterday. False. Boom. True. False. Boom. I went through 6 out of 6. I got them all. They said, Dad, how do you know that? I said, I work with salespeople. It's super easy. Okay? So when we break down motivation, what does it look like? How do we break it down? The 3 primary motivators. The number one most powerful motivator, you know this, is love. Somebody even said this in leadership, by the way. So what do you look for in a leader? And they say, you said charity. I think it was you, sir. You said charity. Okay. Really? I think that probably even trumps what I said before. Because if you have perfect love, perfect charity, you're going to accomplish every single thing you need in leadership. But it just didn't make me look as smart to say that, so I had to say the other one. So, no pride issues here. No. So what happens is love is number one. Why? Because it's self-giving, it's intense, and perfect love moves everything. Number 3 is fear. And there are a lot of second cousins to fear, like insecurity, okay? But love always trumps fear. So if you're afraid of alligators, you're not going to jump into a pond and swim with alligators. Your son or daughter or friend falls into a pond with an alligator, you'll jump in to save them, because love trumps fear. These are easy. We can manage these pretty well. Jason spoke articulately to the idea of fear earlier today. Sticky wicket, number 2. Self-justification. This is the thing that gets in the way everywhere. So let's say you have a job. Your job is an 8 o'clock in the morning job. You have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay? Go back to your well, maybe some of you have the responsibility now. You're a deacon as well too. But go back to a time before where you were working in a place and it was like this. And you have a 30-minute commute. And you leave at 20 minutes to 8, dooming yourself to being 10 minutes late. Okay? And not for a good reason. Extra cup of coffee, snooze, sports center, Facebook, whatever it is. And you fly on the way into work. You drive so fast that you cut your 30-minute commute down to 25 minutes, and you arrive at 5 after. And when you walk in, your boss, Bob, sees you and says, why were you late? Now, don't say it yet, but when I count to 3, I want you to give me the one-word answer that almost everybody uses for why they were late. 1, 2, 3. Traffic. It's like we all went to excuse school together. We all somehow, as human beings, are wired to understand that we say traffic. Now, why do we say traffic? Plausibly deniable and not my fault. That's why we do it. Now, we know the grave circumstance is not actually traffic, but we have to justify it so we feel, because what is the truth? The truth is that you're an irresponsible liar that day. That's the truth. That's pretty hardcore to hear. So since we can't handle that with our own egos, we need to start to build the lie on the way. So we're praying on the way to work for just one red light, just one. So I can sit there and I can say, see, not my fault. And I can justify my lie, but Bob's a good boss. So Bob looks at you and says, you know what, I came in that way and I have the Waze app. There was no traffic. So now you look at Bob and you've got 2 choices here. Go to war right there directly and lose my job. Or walk over to my miserable cubicle, tap on it when Kathy turns around and start letting Kathy know what I think of Bob. Bob's all in my grill, being late, da-da-da-da. Guy's always late. So even know what we do here? And you start World War III against the only the only righteous person in the story, Bob, who just wants what's good. Why? Because you're an irresponsible liar. This is the way it works. And I give that silly little example because it's a day-to-day thing. But there are much more massive ones out there. And am I talking about people that are not in the room that we minister to? Yes. But I'm also talking about everybody in here, including myself. We do this. Self-justification is driven by pride. Pride is the halitosis of vice. It's the bad breath of vice. You're the only one in the room that doesn't know you have it. We can't see our own, so it's difficult to get past. So in influence and leadership, we have to be very cautious because now this actually increases the intensity for Satan to do his work against us if we're honest. If we're honest, we know that we have flaws. Now we have a tendency to do something even worse, and that is to say, who am I to? Okay? Who am I to tell these people to go to confession? Because I remember I didn't go all the time, or even right now as a priest, I'm not going as often as I should. Who am I to tell these people not to receive the, we become almost like Donatists, okay, where we believe that there's not a valid sacrament if we are personally living in sin. Well, God's way too smart to have that happen, and that's going to be valid according to the church, regardless of the status of the soul of the priest, right? It's the same thing in leadership. Like, I would have people who are highly talented. I'm going to use sales examples, sports examples, because they apply. They apply everywhere. We can learn all sorts of things from many different things. But I'll have a salesperson sometimes who, very dynamic, very good, was okay in sales, but they're more inclined to lead. They become a leader, and one of the ways you can determine whether or not they're actually effective now as a leader when they were an average sales performer. Okay, by the way, that was me. I was an average sales performer, hated sales, hated it. So I sold for 3 months in my life as a young person, and then I built organizations. In fact, Decided Excellence Catholic Media and Lighthouse Catholic Media, I always laugh because I would help train people in sales, and I was like, you know that I'm the only one in the room that never sold an ad, right? Or never sold a CD or a kiosk, okay? But what happens is that person would say, even though you should be getting 3 or 4 appointments a day, or whatever the number is in whatever business it is, they know they only got 1 or 2. So who am I to tell these people to get those levels, because I feel like a hypocrite because I didn't do it? So what is that? That is wickedness using goodness against you. It is to say that because I don't want to be a hypocrite, because being a hypocrite is bad, I would rather keep people beneath their potential to save my hypocrisy and to self-justify my circumstance. This is a very, very bad idea. Do you think Therese was in the presence of very many people who were more holy than her? Well, more holy, I don't know. As holy, possibly, but likely with the great saints, they are around people who are less holy. Even their spiritual directors. In fact, some of you may know this, and I would love it if you could remind me who it was. But I think it might have been like St. Teresa of Avila or somebody. Somebody asked them, who would you rather have as your spiritual director? A perfectly holy person or a super high intellect? And she said, oh, a high intellect. Okay? Because their job is to guide that way. And so, but the idea is, if that high intellect, knowing they're not as holy as St. Therese or anybody else they're guiding, was like, well, I'm going to keep them at my level of holiness as opposed to expect something more massive and greater than I ever was, that's a bad idea. Parents with children, everywhere else. You know, oh, who am I to tell my kids not to have sex before marriage? Who am I to tell my kids not to smoke pot? I did those things. I'll tell you who you are. You're their parent. It's really that simple, okay? So we have to make sure that we don't get caught up in these influential things by testing everything against our own personal experience or our own personal virtues, that we would expect greatness out of other people. Why? If you want a real act of humility, the act of humility is to know that the people you lead can, should, and will be better than you. Not everywhere. It's also humility to know that sometimes you have a particular gift they don't have. And it's a false humility to believe you don't have that exceptional gift, and that's one of the reasons people don't use it. So they say, well, anybody could do this. Or they don't recognize that it takes less effort for you to do something than somebody else. Therefore, you have less compassion for what they're doing because it's so easy to you, right? So we have to have these things, and they have to work effectively. So we're talking about influence requires. This is the first part of what this is. It requires that humility of understanding those motivations in ourselves and in other people. I'm summarizing this portion before we go into some Q&A on this and we go into the next. Then it also, in addition to that, allows us to be able to know that we need to take people where they need to go and block the things that are in the way from that. Would it be better off to have a parish? Now, by the way, just, you know, this is a horrible idea. Just a parish that has 10 people that all go to heaven, or 4,000 people and one go to heaven. Yeah, I mean, some people get bothered when you talk about numbers in the church. I've had this happen before. We were working with non-for-profits, and you're like, we need to reach this many people. Or sales is a part of non-for-profits a lot. Okay, you're selling particular items. There's numbers. There's things like that. And they get offended. They go, it's not about numbers. It's about Jesus. You're going to have to take that up with Jesus, who said it was about the numbers. And you're going to have to go have a problem with the Bible where it talks about how many people were baptized that day. okay? The numbers matter. They absolutely matter. If you have 10 people in a boat and it's sinking, how many do you want to save? 10. If you're only saving one and the rest are screaming out, save me, and you're like, it's not about the numbers, it's about Jesus. I think they're going to have a problem with that, okay? It is about the numbers, okay? But why? Because the number's a soul. It's the only reason it's about a number, because that number is a soul, and that matters, okay? If you're in Mayberry, and your parish church is in Mayberry, and you have 2,000 members of your parish, how many souls in Mayberry are you deemed to save? Christ saves the souls, we get it, but you participate in that. How many souls in Mayberry? All of them, the population of Mayberry. I love talking to smart groups. It is the population of Mayberry, okay? It is everyone. And when we think that way, we think totally differently, right? We think grand and big. Small, yes, I get it. I do understand the whole concept of 12. But it starts there and it builds out and it grows, right? Jesus was like this awesome, he had no conflicting ideas or thoughts, but he had these great concepts that were never in competition but seemed to be opposed. To evangelize to all four corners of the world. Hey, let's start with 12 guys, maybe pick a fisherman, like that's pretty amazing. So we think that same way. We're dealing with all the day-to-day small things, but we're saying we need to go grand. Because one of the difficult things that happens in business is when people try to just hang on. You can't grow a company by cutting the budget alone. You can cut a budget, but you can never grow the company that way, because if the company's going to grow, it's going to have a bigger budget eventually, right? So you need to do two simultaneous things. You need to grow the revenues and reduce the amount of expenses you have in proportion to the revenues and increase margin. That's what you do in business, and that's actually what you do anywhere if you're going to be efficient or effective. And I remember I had my first son. I was like, oh my gosh, I never had a kid, and I all of a sudden I fell in love with this son. I didn't know my heart was big enough to fall in love. And I'm like, I don't know if I have any room for a second one, because my heart is full. And it was. And then God made my heart bigger. And then bigger again. It's like, you know this, it's like what they say in heaven. There's ranking in heaven, and that some people have a higher ranking in heaven. And you say, well, how can that possibly be? Because then there must be jealousy in heaven. No, there's no jealousy in heaven. Some of us die as a thimble. Some of us die as an ocean. And when we're a thimble or an ocean, we're full. God gives us all the happiness we can possibly handle. We can have no more. And this is what happens when we're building organizations, to say, I need to grow it. I need to make sure that I'm filling it to capacity. I'm seeing as far out and as big as I possibly can be, because there's nothing less inspiring than waking up and encouraging people to be just okay. Come on, team, we're going to go after it. I want you to be average. Some of you a little less than average, some slightly above, but we'll balance out at average. When somebody goes after you, I want you to come after them as hard as you possibly might, maybe not. And if you need a break, take it. If you're tired, by all means, don't stretch it. Okay? I want you to be here on time, maybe, but you'll be late, and that's fine. Okay? And if you don't like it, then just don't do it. And what I've described is how most people lead their volunteers. I always tell people, if you really, really want to lead great volunteers, fire a few. There's nothing more humiliating than going home and saying, I got fired from the volunteer job. Okay? You want people to see standards, show them you have them, because this, by the way, don't ever make an don't ever make an example out of it. Hopefully you can hear a little bit of my kind of personality coming out here, and that I'll say things to this level just for the effect of memory, even though you would obviously be more charitable in that. But this is a super important thing, is that we need to have that standard for influence. Okay. Now I want to come into things that hinder influence. There is no way you can possibly influence people when you talk only about the other people. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I ever see people make when they're trying to lead giants. That's what I always say, leading giants. If you're going to be great at something, you need to lead giants. If you lead small people in small ways, do a bunch of small things, you're going to get small results. If you want to be great, you find people who are great, or you find people you help become great, and you lead giants. And if you're going to lead giants, they need a big diet and plenty of room to roam. But in order to do that, we can't give what we don't have. So I spend as much time working on the influencer as much as I do on what it is that they're influencing. And this is a huge part of that. Okay, the first part of it is this, that we all have primary and secondary responsibilities in life. And these are things that move into our effectiveness to lead. How many of you have ever been around a person you're leading, and when you're talking to them and they're explaining to you why they couldn't get their role or job done, you are utterly confused? Even though you know their role very well, they're talking to you and you're going, I literally don't understand what you're saying. Raise your hand, by the way, because I see some nodding, but okay. I will tell you that I think that this will become more prominent the more you take some of the information we have, that you'll start to recognize these things, okay? So one of the gifts that some of you have as effective leaders is that you can walk into a room and you can see where other people are missing stuff. And you can just, it lines up, okay? So I learned this because there's so many things I was bad at. My older brother and my younger brother were like all conference athletes, 4.0s, all that kind of stuff. I was a 3.0. I hate to admit it, but you know, it was because Sarah Casper was cute and she would give me her answers and you know, stuff like this. So what happens is there were a lot of things that I couldn't do effectively. And you kind of get humiliated by that. And in fact, even I was decent at sports, and later on I was, but there were some sports I was so bad at. I was so bad at baseball. You know how bad at baseball I was? I won the Spirit Award. That's, okay? So there are certain things that you can't do very well. Music is another one. I'm so fascinated by musicians and by singing. When I sing, my kids usually laugh at me even in church. Apparently just raising your eyebrows doesn't change the sound, so something about that. And I listen to a musician when they put together music, or I'd watch people in math or chemistry, and they'd be tutoring me, and they'd basically get to this point where they're like, are you trying to act stupid? And I'm like, no, it takes no effort at all. It's just flows right out of me, okay? But then there were times where later in life, all of a sudden I was in these leadership circumstances, and I could see something going way wrong. And when I was young, I had an intuition about it, but I didn't really say anything, and I was like, well, if they do that, this is going to happen. And then I would see the pattern, and it did happen. So I started to grow and become better and more courageous and bold and say, we can't do that. If we do, this is going to happen, and then do that. There's a natural gift there. That is absolutely not pride in that statement. I've pride everywhere else. I've pretty much all over the place. But in that particular statement, it is an accuracy, because my pride was initially to say, well, I couldn't possibly have that gift. Everybody could do that. But then you start to recognize, just like a musician can hear things or see things in the mathematician, you may or may not have gifts certain places. What I've learned is that you can actually learn to see these patterns over a period of time, just like you can learn music by understanding math and timing. And so there are ways that you can become better at these things when you understand the principles behind them. You will start to recognize that if you are confused by people you are talking to, they need to be corrected, led properly, or released, because you cannot go anywhere with them. Because if they're confusing you and you are their superior, they are confusing everybody around them. And you can't get things done with confusion. Okay? Order is necessary for peace. And prosperity does not come without peace. You need order to have peace, and you need peace to have prosperity. There is no order in confusion. So where there is confusion in your organizations, it has to be eliminated. So what happens is, I've worked with thousands of people. I haven't fired too many people. Mostly I just find a better place for them to be on the bus. But there are some times that I've fired people if they have grave moral behavior. But another time that I fire them is when I cannot understand them. Okay? And this is super important. Why is it that people start to act confused? If we come back to this principle of self-justification, you will see why. We have primary responsibilities. A lot of times we don't want to do our primary responsibilities. So when we don't do our primary responsibilities, we default to our secondary responsibilities. Why do we default to our secondary responsibilities? Because they might be more enjoyable or easier. But when we default to a secondary responsibility, we must make it complicated. We must make it very hard, because it's the only way we can justify not doing our primary responsibilities. How could I get to that when I had all of this going on? Salespeople will do this with administration. Your job, make calls, get in front of 3 customers every day, make it happen. Well, I couldn't do that. I had all the administration. Like, I've started companies and I know exactly what the administration is and I keep it as super low as I possibly can. Like, the reporting for some of my companies for salespeople is they need to text a number of how many appointments they have that day. 2. It takes 0.00000 calories and 0.0001 second in order to actually do the reporting, but they'll say, I was bogged down by administration. And I'm like, literally, you know who you're talking to, right? I know exactly what the administrative responsibilities are. And by the way, what you're trying to do is a very easy strategy of pitting 2 good things against each other. Because you know that I am a bulldog on making sure administration is tight and right. So you're trying to basically use my principles against me by saying I'm trying to honor it's the woman you gave me, by the way. Okay? Try to use all these strategies are old. Okay? Trying to use your standards of administration, which is why I can't also honor your standards for sales. So I just never let them do that. You have to play a keto with them on this. I go, yeah, the administrative stuff is super important, which is why you need to get that primary responsibility done first so you can get to that secondary responsibility. So I'm not telling you not to do the administration. I'm telling you it has to come in that order. Because on the day, now use the administration and sales, use these as a metaphor, okay? On the day that you manage your secondary responsibilities first, you will absolutely never get to your primary responsibilities. It'll never happen. Okay? And you're going to have to make them complex, and you have to believe the lie, by the way. And the reason you have to believe the lie is because being an irresponsible liar is no good, so you have to believe the lie and justify it. But on the day that you get your primary responsibilities done, you will always have time margin, extra time to do things. It leads to a lower blood pressure and a happier life when we get the primary responsibilities done first. So you can see how essential this is for yourselves, but you can also see how essential this is to guide your people in it, right? To guide your people in making sure that they know what are my primary responsibilities. So if you really want to influence somebody, here's what I would recommend. Break down their role with them simply. I'm going to need somebody to, what is your name, sir? Leo? Leo, bring me back to just this term 3 S's, okay? Just say 3 S's and I'll know. So, primary and secondary responsibilities. There was a gentleman who was in an organization that was very, very successful in sales. But the momentum was so much on the side of the organization that as a sales manager, he really didn't have to do much. Just like congratulate people on how awesome they were. He was recruited away because the other organization saw that he was charismatic and they basically were misinterpreting his sanguine personality and all the numbers because of the momentum of the economy and everything else with the fact that he was driving results. They bring him into a new organization. The climate was very different. Things weren't happening. They hire a consultant. The consultant comes in and says to him, in other words, in order to turn things around, says to him, what is your job? And he went on and on with this super long answer about what his job was. And he said, okay, well, I don't understand what you said. I'm going to give you 48 hours, excuse me, and I'm going to come back. If I get too close to that, apparently I'm going to get too much feedback. So, not bad, huh? All right. So, excuse me. So he gives him 48 hours. He comes back and he says, what is your job? And he said, my job is to increase sales. He had all this really long stuff, but he said, my job is to increase sales. And the guy said, when? What do you mean when? He goes, when is your, when? And he goes, today. Okay. So the guy went out and bought hats and memo pads and t-shirts and coffee mugs that said, how am I going to increase sales today? And gave them to all of his people. And they turned the focus on the daily effort to increase sales today. This is a part of that. So what is the role that somebody has? How many of you have somebody in your organization whose role and title is called email checker, Facebook checker, social media overthinker? Do you have any of those people? Because they are doing that job while they're there with you. Okay, overanalyzer, tell you everything is wronger. Okay? These are jobs that you can eliminate and you will see no ill effect. Okay? But if you break it down with them and you say, at the end of the day, see, the people you lead, they want to know, how am I doing? Do you know this? This is really the number one thing they want to know. How am I doing? Are you proud of me? Do you think I'm doing a good job? Am I secure? Do I have value here? Am I appreciated because of what I do? And as great leaders, we should provide those affirmations. What a beautiful thing. Hey, I just want to let you know, I'm really excited about the work you're doing. Here's a particular compliment that matters, and you're influencing them by reinforcing good behaviors. Okay, this is a very good thing. The worst thing as a leader is to go, well, I don't need that sort of affirmation, so I just do it. That's not important to me. Okay, well, so that's like the weakest way to lead ever. It's to say, it's not important to me, so it's not important to other people. That's entirely selfish leading, is to believe that you're leading everybody who acts and behaves and has the same needs as you. Great leadership is to step out and say, you know what, I might not need this, but they need it. And you could win, by the way, you could have the victory. Maybe you're right principally in that they should just do their job and not need the affirmation, especially if they're doing it for Christ. They should just do that. You might be right, but would you rather be right to your own demise or wrong to your own prosperity? Most people would rather be right to their own demise than wrong to their own prosperity. And by the way, I'd write that one down because that works great when you're in meetings and you're trying to come up with a great idea and people get really committed to their bad idea. Okay, so you celebrate that idea of being wrong to your own prosperity. So what happens is you break it down and you say to this person, at the end of the day, while I will be here for you and support you, I want you to know how to self-guide and self-lead. This is real hyper-influence. This is really good influence stuff. You need to be able to know whether or not I think you're doing a great job, all on your own. And you're in charge of maybe development here, or you're in charge of a men's group here, or you're in charge of this event in parish, or you're in charge of this particular board. Every single day, if you talk to 3 people about this, or every single day, if you call 2 more people and get them involved in this, you have won the day. In fact, if you did that in 7 minutes, you could go home and we'd pay you for the whole day. Because the impact of that would be so great, it wouldn't matter. And most people go in and they try to fill space as opposed to get the thing done. Getting the thing done matters more than anything. My employees actually in my company, I tell them you can work where you want. This is before COVID. Work where you want, when you want, whenever you want. Just get the job done. We hired you to accomplish this. And it is worth our company to pay this much money to get this done. If you got that done and you called and said, hey, I'm in Tahiti, I would say, enjoy the sand. I wouldn't say, well, we're going to have to cut your pay because it doesn't take you that long. Because what the organization gets out of you doing that is worth what we're paying. And if you can find a greater lifestyle in doing that in a shorter period of time, good for you. Okay? That makes them, because otherwise people spend all this time lying to you. You know that the top responsibilities of employees are to convince you that they are overworked and underpaid, right? Okay? And they're going to do that in all sorts of ways. But if you actually take that power away from them, they won't do it. They just take the power away. And now I invert it so they convince you about how productive they are. And they want to impress you with being even more productive. And if they needed to do 2 things every single day and it was worth paying this much for that, I'll tell them, hey, by the way, you don't need to because we hired you to do 2, to get this done twice a day and it's worth this. But if you did a third, there's a bonus. Wow. Now what is the conversation with you have them all the time? It's a completely different one. Now, I'm not saying this always works in every role. I get that. This isn't about necessarily the structure or the type of role. I get that. But it's the idea. It's the philosophy behind these sorts of things to reduce things, to not provide people an opportunity or incentive to lie. Okay? But instead, to provide them an incentive to impress you, not on the whole pride level of impress, but to make an impression upon you that they are contributing in a way that really matters. So here's how you know without me telling you you've done a great job. You do this every day. If you're not doing that every day, you don't need to ask me because you're not doing a good job. Just simple. You set this up especially before you hire somebody, when you're setting up a role, and I realize that a lot of people are already in positions and everything else, but if you set that up ahead of time and you have a clear conversation about it, you're going to attract people who are attracted to that mentality. And I'm going to tell you, you are going to build the greatest organization of vibrant people who want to do great things. At the end of the day, they have to know why they're doing it. Why do the custodians clean the floors? Why? I'm hearing this stuff. Save souls. Save souls. The custodians clean the floors to get people to heaven. They clean the floors, so the floors are nice, so people want to be there. And they want to be there so they can receive the sacraments and go to heaven. That's why they clean the floors. If you could stop cleaning the floors and double the attendance of people in your parish, you should do that. Okay? So it's just important for us to never forget, hey, what are you doing here? You've heard this story a million times, but it's that whole idea of somebody walking by and seeing a bricklayer and say, what are you doing? He said, I'm laying bricks. Goes to the next guy, what are you doing? I'm building a wall. They get to the next guy, what are you doing? I'm building a cathedral that's going to stand for 1,000 years. Which one of those people is going to come back to work every day? Yeah, the one that's building a cathedral that's going to stand forever. Not the person who's just laying bricks. They're going to lay bricks anywhere. Okay? So why are you doing it? What is the purpose behind it? Let me just pause here. Any thoughts, reflections, or questions on anything we've talked about? Yes, Father.
My predecessor was a micromanager.
Yes.
So I know that employees grow a little bit with the gap.
Yeah.
I need to remove myself a little bit. I'm not involved in their stuff. They need that responsibility.
Yes.
But when I provide that gap, I find I just get mediocrity and not growth.
Okay, it's a great question. Predecessor was a micromanager. Father is not a micromanager, is suffering from some of the previous micromanagement. It's very hard to come right in as a new system with a different way of leading and basically give the space. And when you give the space, they're not being as productive as you need to, so you're kind of forced into old habits that are not your own of micromanagement to get it done. Okay. I have found in this circumstance that there are really great words to use. Okay? They're not as sharp as you might think with some of the previous things I said. The first one is, I trust you. Okay? I trust you. So micromanagers, culpability is very important to understand here. I want to be very non-judgmental and then make a bunch of judgments. So it's true, right? We can't judge the heart and the soul, but we're supposed to judge. I mean, clearly you can't decide how to get dressed if you're not judging, Okay, so there's that classic misdefinition of judgment and all that. You all know it. Some people micromanage because of their pride and sin. I have no idea what the story is here, and I would be inclined to say otherwise, okay? But sometimes that happens. To be aware of that is smart. Other times, they do it because they just don't know how. They actually think they're being helpful. They think that it is their job to be alongside that person all along and to guide them, and they actually find it to be a virtuous thing. It's misguided, but that's what they think it is. Either way, micromanagement causes insecurity to the person being micromanaged. The more you micromanage somebody, the more you poison them with the idea that they can't make a decision on their own, so they're afraid to make a decision or take action on their own because they were never allowed to make mistakes, and the mistakes that they would make be immediately corrected. So instead, what I would say is this: Leo, I trust you. I mean, smart guy. You can totally get that done without me. I absolutely don't need to be around for that decision. Yeah, but da-da-da-da-da. Listen, you know what? You might get it wrong. That's okay. We'll just fix it later. Make mistakes, but get stuff done. Fumble the ball, recover it though. Okay, throw an interception, but then get the ball back and just get in the end zone. I totally trust you. So you can get it done. That right there, huge thing. So when you give them that trust, they are now going to reduce the inclination there. But I'm also going to put another thing out there. When you take over from a micromanager, you get a ton of interruptions, don't you? People are constantly asking you questions. So one of the greatest ways to manage interruptions is this way. When somebody interrupts you, they interrupt with like a question, a scenario. They don't interrupt to say, hey, great tie. They walk in and say, we have a problem. Okay? So what I tell them is I say, listen, here's how we're going to work this out. When you come in and say we have a problem, I want you to tell me the problem in one sentence, no more. I mean, if you have to go into 2 sentences, don't be like the French and waste vowels. Just try to keep it to one, okay? Then when you tell me what the problem is in one sentence, I want you to tell me what you think the top 3 solutions are, as short as you can, literally as short as you can. And then I want you to tell me which one you think is the best and why. I can guarantee 9 out of 10 times that they come into your office, they will not come in anymore. Because the basic thought process of here's the problem, here are the solutions, this one's best, becomes so obvious they just do it. And if they do come in, you have an awesome thing happening. You have the ability to see how they think. And sometimes that provides you the, say, well, this is a good person, they're smart, but I need to guide them. I'm going to provide a little bit more training so they can make these decisions. Other times it says they can't be in this role. They literally do not have the ability to form these thoughts, questions, and make a decision. And that's okay. Good people can be in different roles. Okay? So does that help? Those things will reduce that a lot. I mean, we could go a lot more on that, but I have helped people with that particular thing on those 2 things, and it has eliminated a lot of it. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes?
My question is, I like your concept about firing the volunteers, but how do you attract the good volunteers?
Yes. I can tell you how to, I will tell you, this is not, everything when you're standing here up on stage talking to a bunch of people makes it sound like, oh yeah, that's going to work great and blah, 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 blah. No, okay, it's like fail fast is a part of this, but there are some ways to attract great people in volunteering, and it's awesome. Weakness repels. Weakness is so repelling. You can never attract somebody in weakness, only in strength. Do you know the story of the Endurance and Ernest Shackleton, anyone? If you don't, I recommend you read a book called The Endurance and maybe even watch the documentary. He wanted to be the first to cross the Antarctic, okay? And this would have been just before World War I. And he put an ad in the paper, I don't have it memorized, but it was something like, adventurers needed, odds of success low, freezing absolute, high levels of danger, risk of hunger, blah, 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 possibility of death, yes. He was overwhelmed with calls. He was overwhelmed with calls because people are looking for a way to be great. So what we need to do if we want great volunteers is we need people to understand the mission, and we need to let them know who we want. Hey, you know who we want? We want about a bunch of mousy people who come in, kind of be committed. You know the type of people who never make waves about anything and like to keep things really small and simple, okay? You wouldn't say that. You'd say, you know what we're looking for? I'll give you another. Military recruiter, a guy that I remember his story. He used to go into a mall and look for like the tall, long-haired, tough leather jacket guy, and he'd walk up behind and he'd tap him on the shoulder, and they'd turn around and he'd go, sorry, you're not what I was looking for. And they go, what? And they go, no, we're looking for badasses, sorry. And they're like, what? And this was like, wow, okay. As opposed to, would you please be in the military? You don't have any other choices. Please, I mean, what else are you gonna do, right? So strength attracts that sort of thing. By the way, I can sense that you have strength and you come across that way, no doubt about it. But here's the other thing about it, and this is just the grave reality. So you'll have salespeople. I love this analogy for leadership no matter where you are. Salespeople, has anybody ever worked in sales in a past life? What do they always say? Sales is about it's about the customer, but it's also about the numbers, right? It's a numbers game. The more no's you get, the closer you get to a yes. That's what they always say. So don't worry about that. If you're talking to enough people, you get enough no's, don't let them hurt you. Don't fear rejection. Don't let rejection hurt you. You're getting closer to a yes. Then what happens is they get promoted in their sales management and they hire one salesperson and they expect them to be perfect. And what I always tell them is, listen, you could have perfect training, perfect everything. You hire one salesperson, you have about 5% odds that they're going to actually work out. You're just going to have to constantly put together a perpetual recruiting process, knowing that people will leave. And then when you get that one person that does stick, awesome. Have them stick and now get a second one just like them. But you have to understand there is a recruiting process that will never end. So in volunteering, if you put together a team of people that are perpetually recruiting volunteers, and you have a funnel of volunteering, and you understand that attrition in volunteering is natural, when you lose volunteers, it doesn't hurt as much because it's a natural part of the process, and you understand it. That is really the ultimate key to finding great volunteers, is to put together a perpetual recruiting process, knowing that attrition is a portion of it. And then when you go through this, you want to make sure that you're tightening the drain of the tub at a level that allows the water to come out slower than it's coming in. That's your retention. If it's coming out as fast as it's going in, your recruiting pool is going to be so frustrating that you can't really get anything done. So you got to tighten that a little bit, open this up, and then if you just stave it off a little bit, if you get 10% more retention with your volunteers than you had before, now you have these long-term people that stick, and then even better, what is your name, sir? Mark. Now what you have, Mark, is you have people doing this for you. You now have deputized these incredible people who are going to have that power to attract as well. And now you've got strength begetting strength begetting strength. And what do people want to be around? A bunch of these strong people getting something done. That's a huge part of it. Yes, Father.
I just have a hard time with the word volunteer. And
Yeah.
really stop using volunteer. I'm not recruiting.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea in philosophy. I mean, there are times where a particular word now becomes so diminished in its value or strength. I mean, all of the different, I would use a word because I think calling something is powerful, but I don't know if that I would reserve that word. See, volunteer is like everywhere, right? But I would say, these are bad ideas. I throw out 100 bad ideas beforehand, but we need 7 soldiers for this. We need 4 team members for this. We need a crew over here. It's a 4-person crew. We need leaders for that. And now they're titled by not a weak title, because the denotation and connotation of words is super important. The word prudence now has a connotation of weakness. Whereas before, you go back hundreds of years, the word prudence looked like a Marvel character on steroids. Now it doesn't. I'm going to come back to that word, which is I'm laying that out there. But I love what you're saying, Father. I think it's very insightful. Baptize is great, by the way, too, because it doesn't allow people to wiggle. Hey, you know what? Just so you know, you're going to be doing this within the organization of the church or otherwise in order to get to heaven. So where are you actually committing your time to do this? I'm not really sure. That's great if you're committing to these other organizations that are not part of the church. But every single person here is deemed with the task of doing something like this. We've got roles in the church. It would be great too. But you know what? Make sure you're thinking about this. So between this week and next week, what is it that you're actually doing in that way? And if you can't find something, we've got some stuff. Yes. Yeah, Crusaders. Yeah, Crusaders is certainly a great one. I have a fond heart for the Crusaders, and I also admire the challenge you're willing to accept by calling them that. Yes. Where in Canada are you from? Okay. Oh, absolutely. I own a company up there too. Oh, yes. Yeah. No, you didn't. Mm-hmm.
I think I know some of the answers to this, but I would really like your insight. I hear a lot of John Maxwell coming from you.
Thank you. I don't read a lot of John Maxwell. There is one book in particular that I did read that I'm a big fan of, and it's The 5 Levels of Leadership. That is that's a very, very, very good one, but I appreciate that. Okay, 2 things that I would say. I'm going to start with the hard part, and then I'm going to go into that part. So I do work with particular parish priests. Sometimes I will coach them on things, so I get a chance to get into the weeds on issues that are taking place. One of the things that I have found that happens a very high percentage of the time is that you cannot push a string. That there's just a recent one where he's working with like a group of people to build youth ministry, and he has a director for it. And he described the director, and the director's behaviors are abundantly passive aggressive. Father didn't recognize them, but they were. I would ask about the culture and ask about this and ask about that. And every time I came back, I said, Father, I don't know this person, so I can't speak to their heart. I'm not judging their soul, but I'm telling you, I have an intuition here. Over several months, he would tell me more and more stories, and he would defend the person. And I was like, get rid of him. At this point right now, I'm just going to tell you that our conversations will not be fruitful. You will never get anything done with that person there. They are blocking your efforts in every single passive-aggressive way. They need to be replaced. There is this thing. Now, that may not be the answer here, but this is a part of the talk that I wanted to get in. Let's say you love the pilot. You own the airline. Oh, the pilot's great. I love the pilot. But the pilot is incompetent at this point. At what point, bless you, at what point is our loyalty to the pilot more important to the 400 passengers that are going to crash? And we build relationships. We say, well, they've been around, they have a family, they have a this. Yeah, but all 400 people on that plane have families. And your loyalty to the alcoholic pilot, okay, is going to kill the passengers. So while this is your brother-in-law, the pilot, you got to can him. This is a reality in the church too, okay? So sometimes you can't fix it. Now, let's assume you can't fix it. In this particular thing, this is a training issue. And it is to say, I want to point out a lot of your strengths and where they come from and why you're effective in leading. And then I also want to point out how some strengths can become our own weaknesses when they're used for good intent, with the right intentions, but they're overused, okay? And I want to teach you to tone them down here to increase them there so we can accomplish the things that it is that you want to accomplish. See, Father, you have a very, it seems, clear understanding of the particulars for both of these people. So I think that if you wrote those down and you went to them individually and you said, here's where we're going to take you from good to great. By the way, not from miserable and overbearing to tolerable, okay? But here are some really good things that you're doing. And because I see this goodness in you, there is greatness that can come. And I want to tell you too, and I've had this conversation, I want to tell you that I love the fact that I can have this conversation with you, because I can't have it with a lot of people. There's a lot of people that I would talk to and I'd say, there's not enough here to work with. But with you, it's like I feel like Michelangelo when somebody said, how did you carve the David? He said, I didn't, I freed it. I freed the David. But what I really am excited about is that I just feel like I need to free one of your hands and then give you the hammer and the chisel because you're working on yourself. And that's a pretty awesome thing. So this conversation is going to be, I'm going to give you a way to say this that absolutely works. Now, flattery is no good. Flattery is when you're saying this sort of thing to a person that cannot perform. Okay? That you can't do that. You heard what I said when that happens. You have to get rid of them. But if they could perform, this is what I've said to my top executives. Like crushing guys who have built great things, but are not performing the way that I want because the standard is pretty high. I say, you guys, I'm going to talk to you right now like we are in the Super Bowl at halftime. And as the coach, I got a bit of a vein coming out and some enthusiasm for the second half. Before I get there, I want to stop and tell you something. You're in the Super Bowl. Can you imagine being in the Super Bowl with Vince Lombardi, and from Wisconsin originally, so you understand, Saint Lombardi. Yes. you're in the locker room with St. Lombardi, and he is grinding you about performance in the second half. What had to happen to get there? You had to make it to the Super Bowl. You are absolutely the best out there, on the best team, performing the best way. So when I talk to you about the challenge that we have in the second half, I am talking to people that I know there's nobody better. So if you don't hear the implied compliment in the very fact that I'm going to call you to a higher standard, you're missing how much respect I have for you. You're incredible. And there are only a few people who are so good like that I could ask to be better. Okay? That essence or that tone it really matters. Again, flattery, it doesn't work because they can't actually fulfill what it is you're asking them. But if they are that kind of performer, they're like, I have never had a beatdown feel so good. Do it again. Okay? It's like one of these things where it's a raising up, but it's a standard thing and it's filled with strength. And then they pursue it that way. And it builds allegiance too. Okay? All right. I have 6 pages worth of notes. Jason's going to go crazy when No, it's 3 pages, sorry. 3 pages for 3 hours. That's kind of how I operate on this. And I'm only to this part right here right now. So, okay. Strategic considerations. Influence is a change igniter. When you influence somebody, you create a decision to change something, an action to follow. I'm going to get into this further on the other 4, but there is something massively underutilized when it comes to influence and talking about it. People will make a reference outside. They'll talk about how it's important, but they won't actually train specifically on it. I became a pilot several years ago, private pilot. I don't fly commercial airplanes or anything like that, but I loved the training. Do you know why I loved the training? Because when you're a pilot, every single thing they tell you to do has a ... after it. And it's, do this, ... or you'll die. And it made it so simple, so absolute. So when you're working with people and you want them to be effective, if we give like kind of a external esoteric idea of something without making it practical and why it matters, we can't make it as powerful. But the key to success, here am I telling you the key to success. But I'm going to break down the key to success and then the most powerful thing in the world. Because these are sound bites that are usable, not sound bites that aren't like, have a positive attitude, but a sound bite that's usable. The key to success, when I was a young man, people would ask me, because my business was going, well, what's the key to success? I didn't know. I was just like energetic and working hard, and I'd try to answer, and I was too prideful to say I don't know, and I'd talk forever. I got to be about 30, and people would say, what was the key to success? And my whole full encyclopedia book of answer was broken down to like one book. 35, it was broken down to a page. By the time I hit 40, I had one sentence, and I knew the key to success. And you might be saying, slow learner, okay? Because I didn't invent it. The key to success is simple. It's doing what you don't feel like doing. That's the key to success. I would definitely tell every single person that I lead that. I would embolden that into my culture within the parish. What is the key to success? Doing what I don't feel like doing. Okay? Now, by the way, if you're saying this to a teenager, they're going to use it against you. John Paul, what's the key to success? Doing what I don't feel like doing, Dad. I don't feel like watching TV right now. That's why I'm doing it. It's doing what you don't feel like doing. That's an irrefutable thing, by the way. Holiness is built from that. Doing what we don't feel like doing. Otherwise, it would just be easy and everybody would be holy, and we would have to encourage people to be less holy because the inclination is perfect holiness, right? It's the opposite direction. So we want holiness, but we are oftentimes not willing to do what it takes. And the most powerful thing in the world is a decision. There is nothing more powerful on planet Earth than a decision. Even if somebody says, well, isn't God's love? What if your decision is to reject it? Okay? So our participation, he loves us so much that he gives us power in our decisions. The most powerful thing in the world is a decision. This building is here because of a decision. Okay? The table is here because of a decision. All of you are in this room because of a decision to be here. In fact, all of you are on planet Earth because of a decision. Might not have been that decision, but there was a decision, and you're here. Okay? So there is a decision that causes all things, that is prior to all things. Now, you might have something happen to you that you didn't decide, but now you have a reactionary decision. And somebody else did make a decision, and that's why it happened, by the way. But now you have a decision to make once it happens. Why am I talking about this? Because there is a word for the mastery of decision making, and that word is prudence. The best definition I've ever heard for the word prudence is to master decision making. Joseph Pieper, you know who Joseph is? He wrote a book called, aptly titled, The Four Cardinal Virtues. Usually when I sit down and read a book, I'll read it in a day. That book, it took me maybe 3 months to get through fortitude, starting with prudence, by the way, but because it's like chocolate mousse. You can only read so much of it before you have to just stop. And if you're reading that fast, you're not really thinking about. And I was like, I got to get through this one sentence. Oh, that is amazing. And you work on this. So, if he were here and he heard me summarize this wording like this, he would take the mic from me. But I put things in simple, usable forms for a guy like me. I have to. There are 3 primary steps to prudence, and he talks about this. The first is desire what is good. If the people you're leading don't desire what is good, they may not know what is good for the circumstance, and they can't be effective. So I always like to ask, how do I know whether or not this person can do well? Okay, I'm going to come back to this 3 steps, Leo, back to the 3 steps. But love is the same way. I wish I'd have known this when I was young. So much easier. People say, well, how do you know you're in love? How do you know she's in love? How do you know this sort of thing? It's actually super simple. I didn't know how simple it was. The first, yes, by the way, yes, I'm going to come back to this in there. But what is the greatest definition of love? It's Thomistic, right? To will the good of the other. How do you know you're in love? I want what is good for them. Now, this is not just intimate love, but people say, love your people. I do tell all my executives, literally in the boardroom, what we say is love your people to success. I do tell them that. Love your people to success. And by the way, lest you think that sounds wimpy, I love my kids enough to make them cry. Just saying. Okay? Love your people to success. Will their good. I want what is good for you so much that I'll sacrifice for it. So will their good. And then how do you know it's present? Sacrifice. How do you know that person loves their job? Well, they want what's good for the employees. They want what's good for their coworkers. They want what's good for me. They want what's good for the customers. Yeah, well, it seems like they do that. How do I know that? I watch them sacrifice. That's it. It's 2 simple things. Will the good of the other, and sacrifice is present. If they're willing the good of the other with no sacrifice, it's fake. It's not actually willing the good. It's just fancy talk. So these are the things in there. Willing the good of the other and the sacrifice. So I tell people, love your job. Confucius said that. Love, what do you say? Love the work you have. You never have if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. Something like that. Don't have too many Confucius quotes, but I always tell people, how do they know that? Well, they're going to will the good of the circumstance. Now, how else do you do that? Exactly, it's Mark, right? Exactly as Mark said here. First of all, I desire what is good. All right? What is good here is that we need more people in the parish who are receiving the sacraments, are in the state of grace, and go to heaven. Why am I doing this? This thing that I'm doing doesn't make that happen. It literally doesn't make that happen. Social media is one of the greatest examples of this. One of the ways that we built our company the way we built it is that everybody said, oh, I need to network in sales. I need to network on LinkedIn and Facebook. I was like, no, you don't. Those people don't go anywhere. Can it be effective as a tool? A little bit, yes. But by the time you're done going to your network meeting, you're doing all your networking, and by the way, they always want to find a good CRM, a good program for time management, or Salesforce, or these different types of programs for managing their time. I say, you know what? Give me a virtuous person with a yellow pad that's not online. and he will crush everything you're doing. And I had a guy come along and triple sales in 1 year that used yellow pad technology. Okay? And didn't use any networking. And showed people that. It's the outcome. What are we going after? What are we trying to do? Are we distracting ourselves with things that don't actually matter? Can you draw a straight line between that activity and people going to heaven? I can draw it from cleaning the floors, by the way. People don't like to be in a sloppy place. They're going to go, well, I like that other church because it's nice and clean and neat. Okay? So we draw that line. So when we are talking about prudence, we desire what is good. The second thing we need to do is know what is real. We've talked a lot about this with self-justification. And then the third thing we need to do is we need to pursue what is good. So if I'm a baker, what is good? I bake good cakes at a reasonable price. Delicious cakes at a reasonable price. So I desire that. I have the first step of prudence. I desire what is good. So I bake cakes. And then I say, why don't you taste them? Leo, what do you think? Father, what do you think? Mark, what do you think? You're like, I hate your cakes, man. And I'm like, well, you're tasting them wrong. This is what people do all the time, don't they? And this is self-justification. Self-justification comes up because we're unwilling to change and we can't see ourselves in it. So now are we actually prudent? No, we don't really desire what is good. It's fake. It's just words. If I desire what is good, then I'm going to take that feedback and I'm going to go back and I'm going to make great cakes until I say, what do you think now? Why? Because I desire what is good, I know what is real, and now I'm pursuing what is good again. If my kids ever wanted to see that vein come out, I would say something like, go clean your room when they were sitting around. And they would respond, they'd go, I am. No, you're not, because there's a sign that you would be. Like, for example, that little tail of yours would be in your room cleaning it, and it's not. And if you think that you can live life just by saying, I am doing it, when you're not doing it, that doesn't work. But many people believe they go, I am that way. I am awesome. I love my wife. Really, because you know what? You never say it. When you come home, you don't do anything. You don't help. You're not around with the kids. You golf, but you don't even really do that anymore. Now you're just sitting around, drinking beer. Like if I said, I'm a great actor, but I don't act. Am I really a great actor? I'm a great singer, but I don't sing. No, I'm not. I have the potential to be that, but you can't just say I am and then be that. You ever around a person who says this? I'm just that way. That's the worst relationship to ever be in. I'm just that way. And by the way, you're the worst in a relationship if you're saying that. I am that way, but I'm working on it. That's a very different thing, right? And we're not talking about nitpicking. We're talking about character issues, the things that matter. Because the person who says, I am that way, just accept it, will never accept it from you. They will beat you down to change you. So we need to make sure that these things in leadership, where the intimacy of the relationship matter much. And prudence is the way that we see these things. I desire what is good for you. I desire what is good for the parish. I desire what is good for the circumstance. I know what is real here. And what is real here is that if Jesus were a general manager and he came down, he'd be really disappointed. By the way, I'm not speaking of any particular parish anywhere. Okay? If he comes down and he's super excited about it, that's awesome. And in your particular parish, that may be the case. But I'm saying, if the particular circumstance is where you are, what you're doing, and Jesus would say, okay, wait a second. What is the Great Commission here? How are you doing that? How are you sacrificing in that? Are you afraid? Did anything happen? Did you give up? Did you seek the help? Are you looking for the resources? Are you expanding your influence? That is so hard for me, by the way. It is so hard because I built a board of directors in my mind for the businesses that I built. Jesus is on it. Blessed Mother is on it. Got some just cool people like, Abraham Lincoln. I thought that'd be fun to ask his opinion about a few things. St. Paul is on it. St. Therese. St. Therese, who has influenced me more than any other human being other than Christ and the Blessed Mother. St. Therese. And when I went to a retreat and I read and meditated, and it was like, it transformed me. I have a tendency to slip back anyway, but it transformed me. And when I told my friends that, they were like, oh yeah, right, because we see you as a little flower. Come on, you got to be kidding me. But it is amazing how these influential things can happen, how they can transform us in that way. So we have to have prudence. We need to master decision making. Here's the problem, that people have a tendency to say, well, I can or I cannot do that. And it is true that we have tendencies. Some of us were born taller and stronger, others more inclined to art, others more inclined to music, others more inclined to science, naturally. We can use those abilities and we can take those natural talents and refine skills further and glorify God. But just like you can't take credit for being 6'5", you can only take credit for what you did for being 6'5", you can't take credit for these natural things that we have. Okay? You can't take credit for them. You just have to work on them. So people have a tendency to actually believe that they can't actually do something more. Well, if I'm not 6'5", but I want to play basketball, I can work on jumping and speed and my shot. So I can still play basketball, but I have to come about it from a different angle. Okay? What is so cool about prudence or any one of the virtues is that they are the muscle of the will and the intellect. And people must know they have access to them. I am not talking about the theological virtues, where you can speak circles around anything I could say. I'm talking about the cardinal virtues, which are natural virtues, which even not in the state of grace, we all have access to. God loves us so much that he gave us these natural virtues that we can use to become great. Okay? And they are the muscle of the will and the intellect, meaning that if you want to build your leg up, you work it out, you eat protein, you work it out, and it becomes stronger. If you're a bad decision maker, make more of them. Okay? Maybe not big ones, but make more of them until you become good at it. Ask yourself, do I desire what is good in this situation? Do I know it is real? Am I pursuing what is good? And build that pattern until it applies to something bigger, and it becomes easier. And let the people know that you're leading know that they can do that. But are you hearing sound bites in here that will affect leadership and influence? When you're in a meeting that you can pull this out and you can say, today we're going to talk about desiring what is good and knowing what is real and pursuing what is good. Today we're going to talk about numbers. Today we're going to talk about your job and how it gets people to heaven. Today we're going to talk about the key to success. Today we're going to talk about, and we're breaking some of these things down in usable form because these are the things that help train the character. See, if you have two organizations that have they have access to all of the same things, the same resources, the same talent, the same markets, the same everything, but one of those teams is committed to being the best version of themselves, and one of them is not, who's going to win? The team who's committed to being the best version of themselves. The greatest version of anybody is a saint. And sainthood it's a tough thing. Sainthood has a massive temporal effect. People forget that. And I think the problem with pursuing holiness is that people think that it's only for heaven. No, holiness will make you bigger, faster, and stronger here on earth. It does that. God loves us so much that he gives us a little bit of a reward here. Unless we're called to a super high level of holiness and we're absolutely in mortification for a long time. There are some very rare saints that go through that. But for the most part, he gives us a little bit of that blessing and benefit here because our good behaviors lead to strong actions and they get things done. So when we shape the people that we're working with, we embolden them. We don't tear them down, but we bring them up. We love them to success, and we see that we have some flaws that they may have, and that we can get things done further. Big things happen. One of the most important things in mastering decision making is understanding that the speed of the decision needs to be related to the weight of the issue. And this is one of the things that people have confusion about. And it's how you know you're around a prudent person. And I'm going to test you a little bit too, just privately in your own mind. How are you doing on prudence? Aren't these the hard things to ask ourselves? Like every time, I know you probably do this. I'm making this assumption because I just had 5 conversations or maybe 10 conversations just during the break. And I recognize the holiness in the room. I recognize the mission in the room. I get it. But when you have a homily, that you're speaking to yourself too, right? Okay? And when we're doing this sort of thing, we're talking about decision making, where have we done this the right way or where have we not? So if my kids were to ask me something that was important, okay, and they would press me for an answer, and I needed to give it a little bit of thought, I had a standard thing that I'd say. I'd say, I can tell you tomorrow. And they go, Dad, I said, if you need to know now, the answer is no. That's easy. I mean, if you need me to answer now, it's no. If you give me the appropriate time to think about it, I'll give you my actual answer. So you know you're in the presence of an imprudent person when you have 45 minutes for lunch during the workday and they can't decide where they want to go. And then when they get there, they can't decide what they're going to eat. And it takes way too long. But that weekend, they spontaneously buy a car. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with taking time and picking out a restaurant. Is it an evening? Is it an event? Is it a time to relax? What a nice process. What a way to glorify God by saying there's like great culinary craftsmanship that they're going to provide, and I'm going to benefit by that and enjoy that experience and praise God in all things. And then to take some time with the menu. So it's not that those things are bad. It's like, when does it fit? Right? When are we applying it to the right thing? So the speed of the decision should be measured to the weight of the issue. Now here's how you know you're around a prudent person. They make decisions fast. Prudent people can even make heavy decisions very quickly. Why? Because they exercise the muscle of the will and the intellect on prudence so fast that when you're around them, you're shocked by the speed of their decisions. How do you know or measure the success of an executive? And how similar is it to holiness? Well, the collective weight of the decisions that executives make that go in the good column, if they outweigh the collective weight of the decisions that they make in the bad column, they've been a success for the most part. Which is why you can have a person make all sorts of great decisions and do all sorts of good things and make one really dramatically bad decision, and they are considered a failure. And they might have even had really great destruction follow because of that, right? The fruits, you'll know them by their fruits. Whereas you'll have others that are making all sorts of very, very bad decisions, and now they have a change and they make a really good decision. And that good decision is what's remembered, and now that puts them on a path to continue to make great decisions. And by the way, doesn't that sound like the story of a soul? I mean, not the actual classic story, the story of a soul, but the story of all of our souls, right? That we need to fight that good fight till the end, and that we need to make those sorts of really good decisions. So do you make decisions rapidly, or do you labor over them for an excessive period of time, not able to get things done? I have a talk called 21 Differences Between Amateurs and Professionals. And among those differences is this fact, that amateurs are impatient in all things and wait for everything. Professionals are patient in all things and wait for nothing. The amateur says, oh, I need to lose weight. I can't believe I haven't lost it yet. I mean, I've been on my diet for 7 minutes. I can't believe I haven't lost it yet. But you know what? I do want that cake, and I guess I'm going to wait till after the holidays to give that up. Impatient in all things and wait for everything. I tell people, if you have New Year's resolutions, I'm going to tell you why they're going to fail. Because you're waiting till the new year to do them. If it's actually that important, you're not going to wait. If you're actually committed to it, you're not going to wait. I mean, there's the classic Augustine, Lord, make me chaste, just not yet. Okay? So, great saints can go through that process. We all can. But it's a sign, if we're waiting for it, that we're not ready for it. So if you really, really are getting things done, you're going to make the decisions now that need to be made now and not sit around waiting all the time. So here's a question to ask you. Do people on your team give you that feedback? Why are we waiting? We're waiting. When are we going to do this? Let's do it. See, this is why I put Jesus and Mary on my board. So that I can't wait. Like, what are you waiting for? It's like parenting. For goodness sakes, priests are called fathers. Can you imagine being a parent and going, I'll get around to feeding them. Somebody said something about 3 meals a day, but I'll do that next week. Or only giving them 1 meal a week and somehow finding it acceptable because you're waiting for something? No, you feed them while you're waiting for whatever it is you're waiting for. So we have to go and do things and take action on things and make things happen in order to get there. And then what happens is your organization behaves the same way, which is an incredible thing. When you establish and build a culture that starts to move on its own. So there's a classic saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker said it. It's absolutely true. There is no doubt about it. If you have the greatest strategy in the world, but you have a bad culture, you can't get anywhere. People don't quit jobs generally. You hear this. They quit the people they're working with because they find them intolerable. Okay? So that's why we have to have prudence, because we have to be able to say, listen, I have to have this standard. Like, it doesn't even sound like it makes sense. Here I'm saying, have compassion, have standards. Love your people to success. Listen to them, encourage them, praise them, make sure they know who they are. Tell them that they're doing a good job, all of that kind of stuff. And then sometimes bring them in the locker room and let them know we need a better second half. But when we bring them in the locker room and we let them know that we need a better second half, what is the one thing that you've heard me weave throughout this as a theme if you want to lead people effectively? They need to feel secure. They need to feel appropriately secure. When my father would discipline me, there was something that I knew. I knew he loved me. I absolutely knew that he would never hurt me. He loved me. And he would get intense with me. Okay? And it felt good. It felt good to be cared for enough that he would invest that time with me. If I did not feel secure while he was doing that, it would have been horrible. But that feeling of security, it matters. As soon as you take that away, people become erratic. They become filled with fear. So as you're sitting there and you're talking to that person and you need to make a change, you need to ask yourself, do they feel secure? Now, by the way, sometimes they have lost all rights to security, and the circumstance that they are in is insecure. And that's okay, because that means that it's about to end. But those should be the exceptional things. We shouldn't have to really talk about those because it becomes so apparent and obvious. But we don't want them feeling secure when we're choosing to work with them, and we want to work further with them. But there is something that happens in the workplace so much that people can't see. It is so present. It's present in every one of your organizations if you're not actively ferreting it out, and it's passive aggressiveness. If you want to lead a great team and influence people, you need to get rid of it in your organization, and you need to learn how to identify it. It's the person who is bothered by the person next to them, so they're waiting to answer. They won't answer the email. They're just waiting. Okay? It's the person who smiles at your face and then says, well, I know they mean well, but... So I'll tell you why I told this guy to get fired. Remember the story I told that priest? You've got to get rid of this person after 3 months. You've got to get rid of him. They would befriend the priest, say nice things to the priest, but then they would go to the team. Oh, and here was the sign of it. The team loved them, but they were totally not productive. They loved this person, but they weren't productive. And there was angst against Father himself, who was highly productive. But yet this guy loved Father, and they got along. I've seen that pattern 1,000,000 times in the workplace. 1,000,000 times. Literally. Okay, I need to go to confession. It wasn't literal and it wasn't 1,000,000, but there was a lot of times I've seen this, enough that it's an absolute pattern. What happens in this circumstance? What happens in this circumstance is, and I don't mind telling you, I fired a CFO for this, is that the CFO, I actually heard his language one time, and he said to his team that he was their advocate. Advocate for what? You think they need an advocate between me and them? Holy camole. And you said that to them? Oh, you're doing what people do. You are trying to build a loyalty with them because of your underperformance so that you are needed because they'll leave if you're fired. And you are building an allegiance to surround yourself like soldiers from your pathetic performance. That is not going to happen here. And then you see morale go down around that. And you see you walk into a room normally where you've got great rapport everywhere and there's weirdness. Boom. He was gone. It went away. Morale went up and performance doubled. I'm telling you right now, if you've got somebody that smiles to your face but is not performing and people love them on their team and they're not performing, it's almost always a passive-aggressive shot at the leader. It sounds like this. I know they mean well, I like work, but they're asking you basically to do a little bit more than probably what you should, and just want you to know you have a safe place with me to underperform because what they're asking is unreasonable. It always sounds nice. Did he really say that? Okay? These are not new sins. They're not new strategies. Okay? That's what's happening. You have to be able to identify it because you can't really change it in a person. You can't change it. A person who behaves that way just can't, there's no room for them in the organization. So learn in a savvy way to identify these things so that you can use strategy, which is to put the right people in the right place in the right way. And you're not constantly fighting against your own efforts. I have to tell this story in a way that I protect the names of those people involved. But I have very, very direct, intimate knowledge, almost like it was myself, of being on a parish building committee where we were looking to build a new church, and there was a guy that came along named Duncan Stroik, if you know him, who is like one of the greatest builders of beautiful churches ever. Where this would be like getting Michael Jordan on your team. It's hard to get him, and he agreed to actually be the architect. I was fighting very hard in this particular parish to make sure he was the guy because nobody knew what was in front of them. Did you hear the story about the Monet that was bought for $10 at the garage sale? Okay. And the reason the people sold it is because they found it in their attic and it didn't match their couch. And it was worth like $3 million or something like that. The value of the painting didn't change. It's just that a person didn't know the value of it. That was Duncan Stroik. We have this Monet right there. And the building committee decided not to pick him, quote, because he's not the kind of guy you can have a beer with. That's how they were making the decision. Okay? So I'm fighting to the point where I'm kind of creating enemies. I go to a meeting, and I happen to see the Archbishop. And he says, hey, Dave, I've known him not as a member of this parish, but just involved in the Archdiocese. I see that you are a member at such and such, and you're on this committee. I want you to know that I saw Duncan Stroik on there. He's got to build this church. It's going to be the most beautiful church that's been built here since forever. I said, great. And I said, but there's a problem. Tonight, we're actually signing the contract with somebody else. So if you want that to happen, you're going to have to call Father right away and put the brakes on and let him know. I show up to the meeting, and Father sees me, and he looks like he's seen a ghost, and he goes, Dave, I need to talk to you. And I said, about what? And he goes, the Archbishop called me. And when he called, he said, I want you to know, Father, and this priest, by the way, is just a really holy guy, and just like the Archbishop, Cardinal Dolan now. I should probably not say these names. I don't know. I don't know. This happened. Cardinal Dolan calls him and says, but he's Archbishop at the time, I want you to, or he said, I saw Duncan Stroik in there, and he goes, don't worry, Archbishop, we will not let him build the church here. And he said, why would you say that? And he said, well, and he named a person who called from the archdiocese in the name of the archbishop, saying that I'm calling on behalf of the archbishop who said, I never want Duncan Stroik to ever build a church here. And he called me 2 months ago when we were in this process and told me that, which is why he's not on the list right now. That passive-aggressive undermining that people deal with on a regular basis is so unbelievably destructive, and it happens at the highest levels. I don't know if we need to filter out those words on the recording or something like that. I don't know if that's really that scandalous. Okay. It's everyday life. It's everyday life. And so, but this is the type of thing that happens, and it can happen right in our own organizations where there's undermining. Get rid of it. Just get rid of it. You can't get anything done. You think about the magnitude of that what he is trying to get done to have beautiful churches built, and he can't get it done because of that. Okay? We have to be very, very, very strong in identifying and recognizing these things. We cannot be afraid of the truth of what happens in our organizations if it's working against what we're trying to accomplish, because you can't influence that positively. Okay? All right. I want to point something out about extending influence. And I'm going to read this as kind of a quote here. Extending influence is done most effectively via delegation of authority. Both particular authority, meaning deputizing people, and moral or logical authority, which would be the subscribing to the same philosophy as a great mind, produce exponential influence. Okay? But I want to break that down. There are two different kinds. One is deputizing. I give them my authority. Have you ever had somebody that you gave power to that now goes and leads somebody else, and the person they're leading circumvents them and comes to you to make a complaint? This is a moment for you in a big way. And I'll tell you where pettiness and pride answer that question. Oh, you like me more, don't you? Oh, you're coming to me because I make better decisions. Oh, you like the way I manage you more than them. Okay. Well, they mean well, but. And you become the person undermining your own person. Do you know what I do? I say, why are you talking to me about this? Well, because, yeah, but I don't know why you're talking to me about this. You're supposed to be going to so-and-so about this. Yeah, but I don't like the way they... Well, you're going to have to talk to him about that or her about that, because this is something that you two need to work out, because they have the authority to do what it is they are doing. You have a choice to listen or not, but this thing you're doing here, that doesn't work here. You want to see this person be the greatest person on planet Earth and the most loyal to you ever? Do that. Say one little thing to undermine them, and you have weakened your organization in a way that is very hard to recover from. I even do that when they might be wrong. Now, we're not talking about morally wrong. That's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about strategically wrong. Hey, listen, I know that you're talking about this as a strategic decision. I'm not saying they're right or wrong about it, but I'm saying that if you want to influence this, you go to them, because that's the person who has the authority. And they are smart, by the way. They're smart in two ways. Smart enough to come up with the right answer, and smart enough to listen to you if you've got a better one. So you go to them. Yeah, but I don't like talking to them. Now you're in a second category. Now you're not in the category of the strategic decision, but now you're in the category of trying to build an affinity here in order to undermine there. So, well, we don't always like everybody that we work with, but you're bigger than that. Now I return that. You're stronger than that. You know, listen, I've worked with you long enough to know that you know what you've done here. That's okay. We'll totally look past it, but you can do it the right way there. So you can do it with a wink and a smile, a reinforcement and a compliment, but you push it back there. Because otherwise we're diminishing, we're fighting against ourselves when we don't do that. How many of you have had that happen, by the way, where that person comes to you that way? Especially because you're father. You know, it is your job to listen to me. Yes, Father.
What if you have somebody and you know it isn't true, but they say, well, I don't want to talk to them because I feel threatened by them.
Yeah.
It's really
The question that he asked, Father asked, Father Tim. By the way, I would prefer to say your last name until you actually give me the opportunity to say your first name out of respect, but you have given it to me, so Father Tim. So the question was, when somebody comes to you and say, well, the reason that I don't want to go to them is because I feel threatened by them, and Father in his wisdom recognizes that that's not where the threat comes from. It's from this person. You know that it's not true that they're threatened by the leader that you put in place. It's this person doing an undermining thing. I would just simply stand my ground and say, listen, I've been around them, and I know how they interact, and I know they're a fair person. So if you've got some sort of axe to grind, I'm going to ask you to manage that on your own, because they're not going anywhere. And you just do it. I had a woman one time who, I was the new leader. I was put in place, similar situation that you were talking about. I was young in my career. Father over here was talking about. And she was relentlessly destroying the culture. It was a small group of people. I was maybe 20-something at the time. There was like 8 people. And she was just really hurting the culture. I brought her in my office. By the way, my policy always is that I never, ever am in the presence of another woman unless somebody else is present, okay? Don't go to lunch. Don't do those sorts of things. So somebody else is there and they could witness this. And I said, I just want you to hear this. What you're doing is never going to happen here. It will never happen here. You're going to either be a part of this culture that raises it up and makes people feel good when they come to work, or you're not going to be here. The third option of coming here and making people feel bad and trying to bring people down, there is no room for it. It will not happen. Now, I also want to tell you this. I want you here. I respect you. I think you're good at your job. And I think you're very, very important here. And I think that if you actually flip that and you try to elevate the culture here, you will have influence that will make this place great, and I will remember it forever. But if you do the opposite, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job, because culture destroys strategy. That's your decision to make. And you know what? Within 1 second, she made the decision to be great, and she was. She was absolutely fantastic. I've left that organization many moons ago, but she's there now like 30 years, and a pleasure to be around. Sometimes people just need to be stopped. When I write my next book, I am very tempted to have the title be Punch a Bully in the Face and 21 Other Things I Learned as a CEO. Okay? Now, not incidentally, that's number 21. Number 1 is Love Your People to Success, but it's a way better title, isn't it? Okay? When you stand up to bad behavior, what do you demonstrate? Strength, what attracts. Strength, what repels. Weakness. But it's strength and love. I did not beat her down. I made sure she knew what? You have my respect. I know that you can be good. In fact, you can be such a part of this, and here's how I will behave about it in the future. Okay? Like I'm telling you right now, you don't need to fear coming in tomorrow, because if you behave that way, immediately you have my loyalty. This is super important. We have to make sure that we're mastering human nature when we're discussing things. You know, to really understand human nature is super essential in leadership. Understand motive are the things that matter. So we deputize people, by the way, sometimes with our authority. You have my authority, but you've got to let them have it. If you really want to drive somebody crazy, have them do a task and don't give them the authority to do it. Don't give them the tools, the time, or the authority. I would walk into organizations and I would say, hey, I want the lead executives to leave for a minute, and they would leave, say, I want to talk to you. I say, I know your plight. I know your problem here. I want you to know I have empathy for it. They're asking you to get more done in a shorter period of time with less resources than ever before, and they're like, oh my gosh, he knows me. And I'm like, they didn't say that, but here's what I know. It's a good company, and all companies are going to ask you to get more done in a shorter period of time with less effort, or with less resources. That's efficiency. That is what makes things great. This is why we have more than just fire and the wheel, okay? So it's super important that you embrace that. And that is not exceptional, that is standard. That's going to happen everywhere. Now, if you want to go on a sinking ship where you can get less done in a longer period of time with more resources, go ahead. But it's going to sink, so bring a flotation device or something with you, okay? So we're talking about, Leo, bring me back to most people want to be exceptional in a bad way. Exceptional in a bad way. If I go more than 5 minutes, please stop me and say, hey, Dave, exceptional in a bad way. I have not fully been diagnosed with ADD, but I am certain I have it. Look, a squirrel. All right. Or there's another form of influence, of extending influence, and it's adopting philosophies of people who are greater than us. Okay? If you're a Thomist and you hear me quote St. Thomas, you're like, he might be smart. Because he thinks the people that I think are smart. So that's got to be good. This happens to us all the time, in fact, that's the reason that endorsements work with products. Well, if he would wear it or she would wear it, then I should wear it. Okay? But when we endorse great minds and great ideas, now we basically are carrying their power. It is true that we are supposed to have Christ in us. It is true that we are supposed to be inspired by the Holy Spirit. And that inspiration of the Holy Spirit is certainly for our own holiness, but it is to breathe into others, right? It is to exist, to inspire others. Okay? The Holy Spirit, when the Holy Spirit gives us words, for a particular on stage or something like that, or in a conversation, you've all had a conversation, like the Holy Spirit gave me those words. Well, then that means that the Holy Spirit inspired you to inspire them, which means the Holy Spirit inspired them. They just used you in that process as that broken pencil. Okay? So we have to realize that when somebody has spoken wisdom and might have been inspired by the Holy Spirit, and we repeat those words, that we are engaging the Holy Spirit in our actions in order to do something bigger and to better. So I would definitely use the opportunity to share with people where your philosophies come from, and then to encourage them to deputize themselves through those same philosophies and ideas. Okay. I'm going to come to this idea, and then we're going to get into some important material. One of the reasons that people have self-justification and excuses, or the strategy that they use, is to be exceptional. And I don't mean that in a positive way. Well, sure, you don't have a problem with that vice because you're a priest. Oh, really? But somehow that makes me not human? That's what, I mean, obviously you have to be delicate in how you respond to that as a priest. But that's nonsense. What would make you actually better at managing that vice is that you are praying the office. You are receiving the Eucharist. You are going to confession. You are doing basically the same things that they could do to become holy as well, but you're doing them according to your vocation. But they want to make it exceptional. My circumstance is so exceptional, I can't be holy like that. Well, sure, you can, work hard at this, or you can be focused on that, or you can do whatever, but I can't because. In the workplace you hear this, well, I can't be focused because I'm going through a divorce. Yet there's 5 other people on the team that are going through divorce, that are there for their families, that are living good, righteous lives, and they're outperforming you by 5 times. Okay, now God did make some people more able to handle stress than others. I have a certain compassion for that, so I wouldn't say that everybody would be performing at the same level. But when people make themselves exceptional, well, the reason I can't is because my circumstance is so difficult or so hard or so exceptional that I can't do the normal things I'm supposed to do. I can't show up to the parish office and do this because of all these things happening in my life. I have actually said to people, how many times you've had a conversation with somebody, whether it's for personal reasons like exceptional or other reasons like they disagree with the strategy, where they're trying to tell you that it can't be done. They're the classic person saying it can't be done. I want to teach you a very, very fast way to correct that. Joe, I just want you to know something. The more you talk, the more you convince me that you're not qualified. You're literally convincing me that you can't do the job you're supposed to do. And if you keep talking, I'm going to believe you. And once I believe you, I'm going to fire you. Because what kind of leader is going to say to the pilot, you need to fly the plane, and they go, it can't be flown. I can't fly it. I can't because of this, this, and then still have them fly the plane. Nobody is. So I just want you to know that you are perilously close to fully convincing me that you can't do the job. Anything you want to say to convince me you think it can be done now would be smart. And by the way, I follow through on that. Because what good are you doing anyone to keep someone in a role who spends more time thinking about how it can't be done than doing it? But yet, what do? We keep them. Why? Because I'm a good person and I'm nice. Number one stupid saying about leadership, I'm too nice to lead. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard, ever. That is to indict all great leaders as not nice. That is to say, every great leader is mean. The greatest leaders I have ever worked with in my life are the nicest people I have ever met. The bad leaders are mean. When a person says, I am too nice to lead, they clearly mean I am too weak to lead. That is what they mean. Okay? So let's be strong. Strong attracts. Weakness repels. So when that person is behaving that way, let's remind them of what's taking place. So don't allow people to be negatively exceptional, only positively exceptional. Popular saying about influence and leaders that are not true, great influencers listen more than they speak. That is silly. And it's absolutely silly. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. They use biology as a way to define the philosophy of speech and language and communication. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. So beware of the person who you have a one-on-one conversation with who said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you speak. The math's not going to work unless they plan on not following their own advice. You do realize that. Here's the perfect formula for speaking and listening. When you're a leader, you speak as long as it takes to be understood. And you listen as long as it takes to understand. Some days you will speak 1 minute and listen for 100. Other days you will speak 100 and listen 0. And if you do listen 1, you've given the person way too much of a platform. That is just the way it is sometimes. Okay? Are you teaching? Are you not teaching? Are you leading? Are you guiding? Are you in a meeting for counsel? Is it a committee? What is it? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? It's a perfect formula. Speak until you're understood. Listen until you understand. And then we can get rid of this self-righteous idea that, well, I listened longer, so I must be better. Well, yeah, you're going to go to the doctor and have that happen? I got a pain right here. Well, what do you think it is? I don't know, doc, that's why I'm here. Yeah, but I'm a good doctor, so I listen more than I speak. Tell me what you think it is. I think you need to tell me, doc. Well, I don't want to be a bad doctor and do all the talking, hog the floor here. Hog it, doc, I'm dying. Okay? So we have to make sure that we don't fall into these silly little things that people say that sound self-righteous. The second one is, I'm too nice to lead. I already covered that. Next one is, if I did it for you, I'd have to do it for everyone. Really? I'm going to give you a circumstance where I've done that before. Top performer absolutely crushes it, so I give them a little extra luxury, maybe take them someplace or do something for them, and somebody goes, no, fair. That's not fair. And first of all, I subscribe to the idea that I treat everyone fairly, therefore I treat everyone differently. Best philosophy. But their mind at that point is too closed and small to understand that, so I totally go onto their argument. It's like, it's another little keto move. I say, you're right. I will treat you exactly fair. I'm going to make this perfectly fair. And when you sell $1.7 million just like them, I will treat you exactly like I treated them. Because then it's going to be totally fair. We'll make it totally fair. In fact, really, if you want fairness, you know how you got that one bonus? Just because it was like a compassion bonus that we got? And they earned it? To be fair, we got to take that away. So if you want me to, you know what you don't want me to do right now is to be fair with you. because you've been treated unfairly generously. So I would like back down the whole wording of fairness, because I'll do it if you want me to be fair. But if you'd rather have me be compassionate like I have right now and to be generous, I'd rather stay there. But if you really want the fair thing, let's do it. Okay? Now, that depends on the circumstance. I would the ability to do that because I always did that sort of thing with people on my team. I did provide those sorts of layers of protection for them if they were like, commission-based or something like that. So you may not have the gravitas of the argument that I had in that because of the circumstance, but you see what I'm doing in the language. What I'm doing in the language is I'm just not letting people manipulate the circumstance. Do you know what is at the, you do, duh, I'm going to remind us, what is at the core of a relationship and communication is the truth. Without the truth, you can't have a relationship. Literally, there is no such thing as a relationship on a lie. That's why it is so, I would rather fight for what is true in a conversation, unless it's true about something stupid like, that's blue. No, it's not. It's green. Well, I thought you said it was green or blue. It's irrelevant, okay? But if you're talking about something that's crucial to a relationship, I would rather fight for what is true there, to have a relationship, than not fight it and stay in a fake relationship that'll fall apart. See, we do this all the time with our employees, all the time with people we're supposed to lead. I have learned long ago that two people would rather sit there and lie to each other if it feels good than to be honest and have it hurt and build something great and long term. That willingness to do that requires at least one party to be strong in it. Why? Because you love them. That's why. It is destruction to go down the path further and further. And nobody ends up happy when that happens. And the pain is greater. So sometimes the most compassionate thing that you can do with somebody on your team is to let them go. I would love to tell you otherwise, but it's just not true. If you hired me to sing opera and you stood me on the stage and then complained about how bad it was, I can tell you both you and I would be miserable. Please fire me. One of the greatest leaders that I ever worked with one time, he was just amazing, an amazing guy. And he never said the type of thing that I'm about to say, but when he said it, he had so much credibility that it just was beautiful and awesome. And I was like, there's like 9 of us that he's leading, and he's trying to convince us to do something in a way that he needed everybody to be a part of it to make it be effective, but he wasn't afraid to make the decision. He was the kind of guy who would make a decision if he needed to, but in this particular circumstance, the decision would have rendered itself useless if he didn't get everybody on board. And he's talking and talking, there's some debate, he keeps talking, and then he stops and he looks and he goes, are you all going to get on board with this, or I have to keep talking? And it was like so endearing. Like we all like laughed like that. And we were like, that was just like, most people could never say that. But he had such a track record that we all enthusiastically got on board because we're like, there's something about the credibility that he had built up to that point. But so there's a time where we need everybody on board, but we shouldn't look for consensus on things, because consensus is actually tyranny. What I'd love to do is put a vote out there and have 100% of people vote for this thing that we think we need to do and to have it happen. Or what I'd like to do is have other people make the decision. In this particular circumstance, we're not finding that sort of agreement. A decision needs to be made, or we're going to sit here forever. I'm going to tell you right now that I believe this is the best decision to make. Could I be wrong? I could be. I don't think that I am. And here's what I need from you. And I'm just going to tell you I need this. And I believe you're big enough to do this. Because what I'm going to ask you can only be asked of people who are actually high virtue and strong. I'm going to ask you to enthusiastically get behind the idea, even if you disagree. Now, by the way, that would make you the most superior person to lead teams, is to be able to do that sort of thing, to have that sort of allegiance to it, as opposed to digging in and being passive-aggressive about it or saying, I told you so. Listen, if I'm wrong, nobody's going to have to say I told you so, because I'm ready to tell you, maybe I am. But it's better for us to make a wrong decision now enthusiastically and move forward and then pivot later than it is to sit around doing nothing. But I need you all on this team to make that happen, even if you disagree. If you agree, you will have my respect. If you disagree and you do this anyway, you will have double my respect. You see what I'm doing here? These things are essential. That sort of language is essential. What is that, by the way? What is the number one you see in that? Strength, right? There's strength in that. It's to not be afraid as you're leading. What's the second thing you see in it, though? Understanding and compassion. I'm not asking you to agree. That's not what I'm telling you. I'm not saying agree with me. I'm saying you may disagree. But I'm asking you to be strong, even twice as strong as the people that agree with me. Wow, what an opportunity to come out the biggest winner because I disagree the most. You know? So there's goodness that can take place with that sort of thing. Any thoughts or questions on that? Yes?
I find that as much success as I have found on an occasion in doing something like that, I'm just exhausted afterward and I feel very lonely because I've had to take such a strong stand. And I guess I'm just saying that out loud so that I know I'm not the only one.
So do you feel, Father, persona Christi, like you might be this exhausted?
Yeah, exactly.
You're doing it right. Congratulations. Don't change any of that. That's awesome. And if you don't feel that way, you're probably doing it wrong. Yep. That's awesome. 8 common traits most people don't recognize in leaders: patience in all things, waiting for nothing. I did do the casserole thing here, so some of this is covered. They're committed. Okay. Great leaders and great influencers are literally committed to expertise. And they're committed to expertise in their own things, but they're committed to expertise in the people that they lead. Here's a funny thing. If anybody who knows me well would ask, how do Dave Durand and technology interface? I don't even know how to make an Excel spreadsheet. I don't. Now, one of the companies that I built is a pretty good-sized company. And we have been recognized by the investment community as one of the most technologically advanced organizations, period. And I would tell you that I know nothing about technology, but I can tell you that the reason we are the most technologically advanced, and I don't mind saying this, it's not a pride thing, it's an accuracy thing, is because I made that happen, even though I don't know anything about it. Okay, I had a team of people that were trying to build like back office technology and all these things, and it wasn't getting done, and they were saying it can't be done, and I said, it can be done. And they said, well, you don't know, Dave, because you don't know how to do this. And I said, you know what? In the 1960s, they went to the moon with pencils and paper. It can be done. We just need to find the person that can get it done. We found that person, and 12 years later, they have been crushing it and building the greatest things in technology within the organization. They've built a team around them, so if they left, that team is still there. All these great things are happening. You do not have to be the technological expert. You don't have to be the finance expert. You don't have to be that. You need to make sure they're on your team, though. You need to be committed to expertise where you need to be an expert, but you need to be committed to enculturating the idea of expertise. By the way, we will oftentimes not demand expertise for ourselves, but we demand it from everybody else. You're going to get LASIK surgery. You say to the doctor, are you an expert? I'm okay. Okay. You're going to get your taxes done. You an expert? Math's never really been my thing. Okay. Somebody's going to teach your kids, or you want them to be an expert, yet we give ourselves I want my Uber driver to be an expert. I want everyone in my life to take seriously expertise at whatever they're doing. Parents, are you an expert parent? Nah, I don't really study it, don't know, I don't know. I mean, I give the kid pot when he wants it, but, oh really, that's not expertise. How about study up? So you do the right things that you're supposed to do. Have the knowledge of it. You can't give what you don't have. So we should all adopt for ourselves the idea of building expertise to be an expert at what we do because we're doing it. Now, it doesn't mean you run around calling yourself an expert, but it means you have that idea. You want your pilot to be an expert? I do. Okay? So how do you become an expert? There are 4 things to do to become an expert, and I would make sure that these are in the organization in some way, shape, or form, so that if a person comes into a role not as an expert, by the way, that's okay, coming into a role not as an expert. I mean, who could really say that as a priest, you're ordained and you're now an expert? No. There's a long process to go through, but we have to seek the expertise in order to get there, because if we don't know where we're headed, we're not going to arrive. So, the first thing is repetition, and the second thing is frequency. This is how we become experts. They're different. If I said I want you to run 2 miles 100 times over a 20-year period of time, it's 100 times is the repetition, but the frequency is so diminished it would have no effect on your health. I want you to run 2 miles 100 times over the next 100 days. Well, that's going to have a positive impact because we've condensed the frequency. If you want to shoot one free throw a day for 100 days, you're not going to become as good at it as if you shoot 10 a day or 20 a day or 100 in a row, where you start to build momentum. So intensity and frequency, or repetition and frequency. But then you also need intensity and purpose, the why. Why am I doing this? And intensity to go with it. So if you took a foreign language when you were young, you might have taken it for 4 years and you know how to say, dos cervezas, por favor. Okay? But you need to be able to take it further, which is why the missionary who never really took Spanish goes to another country, and donde es el baño is really real, okay? And they learn to speak because you have intensity and you have purpose. So if you combine repetition, frequency, intensity, and purpose to your diet, to your finances, to your decision making, to love, to every single thing you do, we get better. Which is one of the reasons that I'm such an advocate of frequent confession. Because, by the way, confession is about the soul and the mind, and it's about the habit, and it's about making it a habit, and it's about becoming an expert in identifying your own sin. When people have been away from the confession for a long time, you know they're going to come in and they're going to just spill big time, okay? And if it's this massive conversion, they might make change immediately, but oftentimes they come back and they're confessing 98% of the same sort of thing because they're entrenched in it. And if they do come back, 2 weeks later or a month later and they've got nothing to say and they feel like they need to knock somebody down the confession line in order to have something to say, it is probably not because they've reached that level of holiness. It's just that they don't have the repetition, frequency, and intensity and purpose to understand how to do that great examination of conscience and see this sort of thing, right? So we can't really escape the idea that our intellectual life is tied to our spiritual life, although culpability certainly is measured according to those things that God can only do. But we have to make sure that we're helping people when we're leading them in this particular way. Okay, they use high power, not low power. They empower people, okay, versus power over them. Oh boy, people love their power. They love their power, and they love the pride that goes with the power. Hey, Steph, I know that the Archdiocese has asked us to do this, but just so you know, we do it this way. You've just killed so much. When you do that, you're crushing things. You know why you're crushing things? Because they say, you know what's cool here? Undermining authority. So that's what I'll do. Father says this. We don't have to do it that way. Now, hey, listen, we may not agree with what's happening in the Archdiocese, but we're under their authority. So we're going to do what they're asking. Let's just do it in a way that we can accomplish the things that we know we can accomplish and respectfully do that. That's a very different thing, isn't it? Okay? So but we know that when we do undermine and we try to conjure up that sort of I'm better sort of thing, it's very difficult. I think my time is done. So we're going into now the small groups. So I'll let you take over for that. Thank you so much.